Hello, hello.
Hey,
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, not too bad. I got a new light and everything, so hopefully it's not as
Nice.
yellow, but I'm trying to step it up.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm missing actually for my setup as well. A bit of a light. Hello, everyone.
What?
Welcome
Oh,
to
you got the
another
fancy
Monday.
setup. What are you talking about?
Yeah, a light is one thing that I'm missing. I got some lights, but they're not powerful enough, so I decided to use them with filters so I can get the colors on left and right. I have some lights at the top that I can change the color, but I don't have anything kind of in my face. So when I stream late at night, I kind of sometimes it's literally really dark. It depends on the screens. So now it's fine because I have one of the screens is it's actually has a white window, but if I turn it off, it starts to get a bit darker. But anyway, and also it's light outside. It's like 2 p.m. here in UK. Hi everyone in chat. Hey Lauren, Martin, Scritch, and everyone else. Hope you're having a good start of a week. We certainly enjoy being here as a Monday, midday for me, very early for Dwayne.
That's like 9:00.
Yeah, well, it's still
Not
early.
too bad. Yeah.
It's Monday morning, so yeah, it takes a while to wake up after partying the whole weekend, I guess.
Not me. I don't know you.
No, well, I was trying to crack a joke at coronavirus because you can't go anywhere, so it's nothing.
I mean, you could party in your house. Have a good time in your house.
True. Yeah. Yeah. We. Hey, Martin. Yeah, we coming up out of lockdown as of Wednesday, I believe, 2nd of December. Yeah, the numbers are not very positive, but we'll see what's happening.
Hey, it's not America's numbers, so let's just
let's not get depressed on Monday morning. Let's talk something positive. So what happened in your world last week, Dwayne?
Well, just doing work. My whole life consists of basically hip hop and code, even though we had Thanksgiving last week. So I was hanging out with my folks and everything, so that was cool. And other than that, so yeah, it was just like the three of us chilling. And so
yeah.
And I'm just
you have a radio show, don't you?
Yes.
I think that's one thing we didn't mention before.
Oh yeah, I do a radio, probably like going on 12 years doing a radio.
Yeah, that explains why you have a very good audio setup but a really bad lighting setup, because you don't need it for your radio show.
Pretty much, yeah. The less people can see of me, the better. So yeah, that's why I chose radio.
Not really like that. It's just you didn't have a need for it until we actually streamed the video on Twitch, right? So yeah,
it's a whole new thing for me. So I'm going to start getting the setup a little bit better.
Yeah. So I've improved my setup a bit as well. So you should start hearing a bit of like a background music.
Yep.
So I started streaming on my personal channel the week before last. Kind of started and kind of trying a bit to get the grips of it, because I think the more you do it, the better you become.
Yep.
So one thing, I was editing one of the videos I did initially, the first one I did with Rails, and I've noticed that I'm saying or cool quite a lot. So I ended up editing the hell out of that video, literally from
it became only like from 2 hours to like 2 minutes.
Not really 2 minutes now, but it became 59 minutes or something. It was my initial Rails with Tailwind and rspec, and kind of my initial foray into that before we did it on Week.init. So yeah, I'm trying.
Very difficult. Yeah, you have to kind of watch what you say a lot, I guess, or just let it flow, because everyone does it. So
of course. Well, I think for me it's probably annoying because I can hear myself saying it, and like I just did it just now. The problem is if I stop myself saying it's when I'm saying I'm literally inhaling air, so it's helping with my breathing. So I run out of breath if I stop doing it. I think the reason I started doing it is because when I moved to UK, my English was really kind of bad. So using as a kind of filler.
Yeah, they call them crutch words or phrases.
Yeah, because I was still doing stuff in my head, kind of thinking in Romanian, translating in English to speak in English, and now it's a bit different. I just go straight to English, but it took a while, and I think that stayed there. So.
Oh yeah, everyone does it. Just gonna think what's coming up
next. Of course. But it's always good to actually do things and understand what you're doing and kind of improve yourself, because that's one of the reasons I'm doing it. Is I'm getting better at doing stuff for my kind of day-to-day job, which is this show. But also it helps me become better as a speaker, and because we both work in DevRel, that's kind of critical stuff for us, right?
Yep, be able to speak with people. Always good.
Yeah,
and that's why I'm here. I want to learn about Ruby on Rails. Never done it before.
Exactly. So let me share my screen. I want to show you what I did, because I did some new stuff, I guess. So this is, whoa. That wasn't supposed to go there, but I think the private key wasn't completely in there, and I think it's an old one anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Cool. So what I did is I haven't used Rails in a while, and I thought, let's try and use it. And I've started doing on my private channel and kind of do some stuff there and use the learnings to put it in here. And then I realized I'm just kind of wasting time, kind of repeating myself. There's some benefit to it, but mainly it's not a lot. So what I ended up doing is actually working on the app on my personal stream as well, with the idea that it will make this faster, and also we can I can show you things and kind of show my learning and having something concrete for you to see, and then kind of continue building on that. So what I did is I've merged kind of, if you remember last time we were doing this balance and app stuff and create the app, and we were building tests. Where is it here?
TDD.
TDD. I've actually commented them out because that's touching the live API. And also what I decided to do is, because we don't really want this, it was kind of for me to learn a bit and kind of see where we are. I didn't want to kind of have it there, because what I ended up doing is writing another set of tests, but for the conversation, right? So let me go to the conversation stuff, which starts here, I believe.
And so that says spec, right? So is that something?
So these are the tests. That's actually a good point. So let's do a recap of what we did. So we're using Rails. We installed just pure Rails. We're using Postgres as a database. And for the testing side, I've decided not to go the traditional Rails route, which is using Minitest, but use rspec, which is kind of has more functionality in there and has a lot of other good stuff. So I've added Rails guard and a couple of other things, and I added .env as well, so I can load stuff from the .env file, which you saw on the screen briefly. That's one thing you should never show on your screen. I had it open because I got confused with, and this is why I had this thing open, because I got confused. I have so many different things in here that I'm doing, and I think this is the stuff that we're using. So probably what I'll need to do is I'll need to kind of make sure that this is the one that I'm using when I'm testing my things. So we'll get to that in a second. So this is kind of what we did. So part of that we're using. So Rails is an MVC framework as well. So it has models, views, controlled in the traditional way. But we decided before we're doing anything to create services, right? So you're literally consuming the Vonage APIs. So we started with the traditional Vonage APIs, balance apps and stuff like that. But I created a parallel service called Vonage Conversations, which are conversation APIs.
Kind of split it out in its own thing.
Exactly. And then as I was thinking of it, I was kind of thinking, well, we have this conversation API, but obviously we don't want to hit it all the time. Right? Because that means you're consuming all the time things. So how about if I shortcut it somehow and provide a data source for it? So rather than hitting the API, I can load the responses from a file and make it really, really fast.
So like mock data.
Exactly. So I'm mocking the data source, and literally this is what I'm doing here. So data source is purely just a simple object here. All it does, it creates the admin JWT because that is specific to the data source. And then for each API call, it does users, and then sometimes you pass attributes. The reason you pass a URL here is because you want to do pagination for users. And I'll show you in a second how it's done. And then you do the same thing for create users. So create users, you pass the name, the display name for the stuff you want to create. And then it does the same thing, and user delete. So when you consume it now, when you have users, you go and get the response from the data source, and then you do all your logic. Right?
Cool.
So this is the service itself. Now, because I separated the data source from the service itself, I can do some really interesting stuff. So in spec here, you create a folder with the same sort of things for, with the same structure. So you have services under spec, right? Because we had services under app.
Mm.
So I'll open it on the right here, and actually I'm going to close this side so I can make it a bit bigger. So what I did is when you test the conversation, obviously I tested the fact that it generates the admin JWT, right? And the admin is so for this one, another thing I did different is I'm actually using an object Vonage Conversation rather than using method calls. So
Okay.
it's not method calls anymore. It's just to get an object, and that makes it a bit easier to test. And it doesn't necessarily make it slower because you create objects over time, because it's fairly fast to allocate data. So this is purely just testing that it exists. It doesn't do any testing inside. I'm not digging inside to make sure that it's there. But what's interesting is, and this is one thing I discovered, you can pass an environmental variable, and you can run tests based on an environment variable. So if that environment variable is false, it skips this test.
Oh, cool.
So what that means I can do is, if I don't pass run live, it will run only the tests against the local files.
Okay, so run live is just a Boolean in your .env file.
So the way, let me look for. I don't have it. So I think the way you do it is if you do run live equals true, and then you specify rspec spec services conversation, Vonage conversation, like that. So if you do this, it runs. So another thing you can do with rspec is you can run only a certain subset of tests. So this one is just a tiny bit here. And the reason I'm running this is because if I run the other ones live, it will actually have an impact on the database. On the
keep creating.
Yeah. So if I run this one with run live spec, it will run this test as well. So if I so I'll run just the 28
retrieve users.
It's just this bit here.
Oh, you put in line numbers. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So you see here, it run the live one, and it just makes sure that we get some stuff, and then runs the other ones, and then this does some synchronization. We'll get to that in a second. But if I run exactly the same thing, but don't have the run live, it doesn't run the live one.
Okay, so by default, it's false.
By default, so if it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. It's null. It's false.
Oh, okay. Okay.
What this means is if you have a continuous integration service, you don't test against the live database. Against the live API.
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
Cool. Yeah. I like also that errors in Ruby, you say rescue. So that's kind of positive. On line 80.
Yeah, this is an exception. Sometimes exceptions are thrown. I don't particularly like exceptions. Just as a concept, exceptions shouldn't be anything that you would expect. So in this case, you would expect the JSON to fail, but it's built like that, and I have to go with it. So for me, an exception is something that is exceptional, like you run out of space.
Yeah,
right?
Okay. I just like the term rescue, like it's there to help you.
Yeah, and you can chain it. So if you have different types of errors, you can chain it with different rescues, right? Right. So this runs against the live API. Now, if I want to run the same test, so another thing is, if you look here in terms of, so if it runs the live, it's 0.88 seconds. Without live is 0.36. So that means you save half a second for a test, which is a lot. Sometimes that can be even over 1 second. It depends on how my connection is and things like that.
And what the test you're doing, yeah. Calls.
So this is the test that actually loads stuff from the disk. right? So let's decompose this. So I'm going to delete this for a second, just so you don't focus on that. So effectively, what I'm doing here is I'm mocking a particular response for a particular a property inside an object. So I'm saying Vonage data source, when it receives a user call, it should return this thing, right? So what that means is Vonage users, if you remember here, it goes to this, right? So that means this gets shortcut and doesn't go to the data source and touches the API and just returns that string.
Okay.
This is what this mock does. And I found it's really, really clever.
Yeah.
And then cool. I was trying to find a library that loads stuff from the disk, and I found this library called VCR, but it was doing more than that. It was really clever, because what it was doing is if you don't have the response on the disk, it would do a call to the API, store the response, and then use it subsequently for new requests.
Oh, that's cool. So like kind of caches it.
Yeah, but in my case, I didn't need that. So what I ended up doing is literally building a small class that has just a load class method that loads based on the file path, right? So the way I do it here is users list success. I don't specify the JSON at the end, because I decided to
add it.
to kind of add it automatically. So what that means is if you have a file in spec fixtures, and that's one place where Rails kind of expects you to put fixtures. So in spec, you have factories, we'll get to that in a second, and you have fixtures, and then you have models, you can put stuff for models. But in fixtures, what I ended up doing is have different kind of folders. So for users, list success is literally just a JSON that I copied like a response that I get from the server, right? So it's something I don't expect to fail. But what's interesting about this is because I have things hard-coded here, I can do tests against that thing. I'll get to
make
that
sure it's there. Yeah.
Yeah. So this loads the file, and then it passes in, and you expect to have users, and you expect to have users greater than. So you have a count on that. So that means it's an array, right? Because users can be. Can it be null? No, it can't be null. It's just an array all the time.
Empty, I think.
Yeah. So I'm not sure why. This is kind of moot, to be honest. Because you don't expect it to be anything else than an array. So this will always pass. This thing will always pass. So actually, that's a good point. We would expect this to have something inside. So this will always be an array, right? So this kind of is pointless, that test, to be honest.
Yeah,
okay.
Fine.
I mean, this is fine. I think this literally tests the fact that you can load things, but the interesting thing you can do, because obviously I don't want to test the response from the API. I expect it to be there all the time. What I want to test is the functionality that I have inside my inside my class, inside my code. Yeah. So the user's method does two things. One is loads data from the API and then synchronizes with the local database. So what I've also did was to create a model called users, which uses this has secure password. So effectively, it's a password encryption mechanism that is built automatically into a gem called bcrypt that is kind of used by default by Rails, and Rails knows how to use it. I'm storing the ID that you get from the API as Vonage ID. So that way I know what to do it. Actually, I can show you the database structure that I created. So it has Vonage ID, which is unique. Then it has a name that can be false, and it must be unique as well.
Okay.
Then it has a display name. Password digest, this is because it has secure password. So it automatically, you pass a password to the model, and automatically encrypts as a password digest in the database, and it does that encryption and decryption automatically. So we will use this for the API when we do the registration and kind of the login.
Okay.
To generate the JWT is active. So what I thought of doing is, if I delete the user, I still want to keep it in the database in case I have links to other places like conversations and stuff. But I want to mark it as not being active, like deleted. And by default, it's true. When you delete it, it will mark it as false. And then I have this sync at. which is a simple timestamp to know when I synchronize it last time to the Vonage API. Right, because the users can be changed outside, right? Someone else can use exactly the same API to update the display name or the name and so on. So what I do is when I read the users, I'm actually synchronizing them, and I'll show you in a second the test that I have. So that's the user. Those are the users in the database.
I saw timestamps there. What is that? I'm sorry.
Timestamps, yes. So this is a clever thing that Rails does automatically on all the models. It adds by default a created at and an updated at timestamps, and it actually updates them automatically for you.
Okay, that's
so
cool.
Created at gets the timestamp. Timestamp is like datetime, but it gets updated automatically. It created that, it puts it first time when it created, then updated that. Every single time you save it, it updates that as well. So that it's not a lot of use for it. A lot of people don't necessarily use it directly, but I think it's useful to have it, and it's a default, so you don't need to worry. Another thing that Rails does by default, it adds an ID column, which is an integer and auto increments it. I don't even care about it.
I think I saw that. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not using it. In fact, hold on a second. So let me find my local database so I can show you.
Yeah, timestamps could be cool. Like if you wanted to maybe run some data on like who joined before a certain time or after a certain time, kind of thing.
Yeah. But usually, what I like doing is to keep that kind of as a separate thing that has a meaning.
Okay.
If you can use created at for that, yeah, that makes sense. So this is the user table that gets created, and you can see the structure here.
You kind of zoom in on my monitor is kind of not
I don't
legible.
think I can zoom on this particular thing.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's fine.
Font. Oh, it doesn't like. Maybe I can change the default font to something bigger. I don't think it
No, that's
does.
fine.
Yeah, I think it probably does it for the data, not for the structure.
That's cool.
But yeah, it has an ID of Vonage ID. It's also the black mode, kind of a dark mode I'm using. So display name, and this is the created at and updated at that creates by default.
Okay.
Right, and the ID is an integer, and it's a primary key, so it gets incremented by default. So that's kind of the structure of the database that I have for now.
Nice.
So you also notice that I kept the name and display name the same way. So that's one of the things I think we were discussing in the last team call, that we're going to keep it kind of consistent, and we're going to change the specs, although we'll need to modify it a bit in our specs and kind of even know that.
Yeah, I think before it was username and name, I think. Something like that.
Yeah, I think I did the specs not thinking in the long term and creating that inconsistency, which is not good. So trying to keep it the same, so it has the same meaning both in the Conversation API and in our database.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Cool. So once you get the response back from the data source, or in the case of our tests from the local file, you return an empty array if the response is null. So this is another thing that I've added here. Always return an array. Always return the same data type. Don't return null or array, because it's easier to kind of act on that later on. Because not getting a response and getting an empty list of users is kind of the same thing from the user perspective. They don't really care.
Yeah.
The same thing if you get an invalid JSON, you return an empty array, and also you return an empty array if you can't find embedded. So this is a bit complicated, and I had actually in the stream where I created this, it was one of those strange moments where a colleague of mine from about 15 years ago joined the stream. He was the most senior developer at the time, and I was a junior, and we were discussing this, and he thought it's a bit kind of heavy. So the reason we're doing this, let me load the Conversation API. actually, developer.nextport.com, and then in here. So for users, I need VO3, but never mind. We can probably use this.
It still has like the embedded and stuff.
Yeah, but it doesn't have this data. So the reason we have it embedded because we expect to have an underscore embedded and then users kind of structure, right? So because of that, we wanted to make sure that we have underscore embedded. We want to make sure that underscore embedded is actually a JSON struct. So open struct is what JSON parse use to create objects. So it's effectively a dictionary from JSON. And then we wanted to make sure that we have a user property in that particular class, and that the user property is an array. And if that's an array, we get the users from that.
Okay.
Does it make sense? I think probably one thing I could do is just put a line there so it doesn't look like.
Yeah, because otherwise it would return. Like if none of those came up, it would just return with an empty.
And this is another thing. A nice thing about Ruby, you can actually put the return before the if to make it a bit more easier to read. So it says return an empty array if this happens.
That's cool. Yeah, that's. And then you're doing another check there with the links,
and then getting the users, and then this is the pagination stuff, right? So there's the links. No, it's not that one. It's this one here.
Yeah, the one
right?
top.
So if there are more records, you will have this next URL, and this is the URL you need to pass back to that user data source that we saw earlier, and this is why you pass the URL over and over again. So that URL will be the next page. And you don't really care what it is because you get this cursor stuff, which basically makes sure that you don't get any skewed data because there are new things being added. Because users can be created while you do the pagination. And you don't want that to kind of mess up your pagination. So if that happens, where is it? So again, you need the links. You need to make sure that it's a dictionary. You need a next. You need to make sure it's a dictionary. You need an href and make sure it's a string, right? And if that happens, you effectively do recursive the same method with the link in there.
Yeah,
that goes back to this and kind of does the full cycle again.
Cool. So that's just going to keep going until next is like no.
Until it doesn't exist, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And that's why you pass it in here. And if you look in the users here, this is the only one that gets the URL passed in. And if you don't pass one, it just uses the start URL.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So because of all this stuff we have in here, we want to test to make sure that this is actually working, right? So I didn't actually type all of that in one go because you can't. So I was building tests and kind of do it in the same time. So what I ended up having is a couple of different tests. So first of all, I want to make sure that I synchronize users, right? So this is factory bots. I think we discussed it last time. It's the one that creates random data with Faker, yeah. In this case, I think it uses Faker inside. So the way factory bot works is you can, so kind of by default, you can do just this, right? So what that means, it creates a user model. So it effectively goes to the test database and creates a user entry. And that is done based on this factories here.
Okay.
So it uses this structure here, and the factory. Probably what I should do is actually make this whole and kind of not use the split because it's easier to read. So the way I'm using Faker inside here, right? So if you another thing, actually, I forgot to mention, we also have tests for the user model. So if I load this, I'm kind of even testing the factories to make sure that they're valid. So I'm going down the rabbit hole that much, right?
Yeah,
because you have
so you're just even
so
the structure.
Exactly. But also you can have traits on the factories, right? So you can say, what if I have a user that doesn't have a password? So effectively the password is null.
Okay.
There are cases like the user is not registered yet with our system, but exists in the Conversation API. That will fit this thing. What happens if a user is not active? So it means it's deleted. What happens if a user was never synchronized? How do I act on that? So I'm
that's
testing
10 minutes ago. That's a thing. That's how the sync is.
This creates a timestamp, a date time, really. So in Ruby, everything is an object. So actually, minutes is a method on an integer.
Oh, okay.
And ago is like a difference. So ago, it literally does time date now minus 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So that way,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So this is one of the things I love Ruby is because it's so expressive. It's so easy to build stuff. And it's purely because everything is an object.
Yeah, that's cool. So it just knows that if you have an integer, then you can do minutes ago or what have you. That's cool.
Yeah. So it's actually one of it might be actually defined in Rails as a helper, I think, rather than in here. So minutes ago Rails. Yeah. No, this is a different one. This is for the view to display from. It's kind of the opposite, but it's part of it's part of Rails. So
that's cool.
It's part of active support duration. This one.
That's cool.
So it's kind of Rails has all these different utilities. A bit how kind of nodes add stuff to JavaScript to make it a bit more expressive.
Yeah, because I was saying JavaScript, we have to do like a new object, like date now, and then subtract whatever time and stuff. And it's like in milliseconds and all these things. So that's cool. It's just like 10 minutes. So you can do like 10 seconds ago or...
Yeah, until days ago. Yeah.
Oh, that's
because
cool.
Another thing that happens with a lot of methods, and it's kind of the default in Ruby, is the method returns the object itself. Right. So the reason this works is because 10 minutes actually returns a new object. There's a type date stamp or an interval, which is it's kind of its own type. And then that one has the .ago method that returns on its own a timestamp.
Oh, nice. That's cool. Wow. That's helpful.
And this is why I can build all sorts of things. So and kind of when I was doing Rails kind of full time, what I had is a list of libraries that would be helpers. So random string generators, for example, you could have a similar thing. So you can decide you want 10 characters long string.
Oh,
right?
Okay. And it would just so random, characters would turn into like a string, and then
Yeah, you can build your own things, and if they exist already in the type. If you define them on the type yourself, it overrides the default kind of functionality, so you can build your own things. I think it's quite interesting.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I think in Angular, you can kind of do something similar to that, like your own custom like pipes, they call them, I believe.
Interesting. Yeah, I think this is one of the beauties of using modern languages. You can do things like that, and just it kind of increases the developer happiness.
Yeah. You can add on things. That's cool.
Yeah. Cool. Nice. So that was these are the specs that I have. So for each trait, I'm testing that I'm actually doing the right things, and it might seem like a trivial thing to do, but I just want to make sure that I don't change it by mistake and kind of not be what it's supposed to be. So I'm testing that, and that was kind of detour. So you can create a default thing here, but also when you create a user, you can specify extra properties that you want to override whatever you have inside.
Okay.
Right.
To make it a little bit more specific.
And the reason I'm doing this is because that is one of
in your mock data or something.
Exactly. It's one of the entries here. I think it's the first one. And what I want to do with this is I'm creating a user with that ID, but other properties. And I want to make sure that when I'm synchronizing the data from this file gets put in the database. So effectively overrides the database and synchronizes that way. So this is what this test does. It creates a user. It makes sure that sync out is less than and you can do this thing again less than 5 minutes ago.
Wow, yeah, that's cool.
Right? Because we defined this 10 minutes ago, and I want to make sure that is being updated. Probably this is not the best way to do it, but it works, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to make sure that I have one user in my database. So user all count, it counts all the users in the database. User all gets all the users in the database. And I'm mocking the data source to use that file. Right? I want to and I want to make sure that I have 5 entries in the users. So effectively, this does the sync. So it's a bit hidden. Probably I shouldn't have it like this.
Okay.
But I'm actually. So let's call it API users. I like putting things kind of into different things. So it's more obvious that this does the sync.
Okay.
Right? Otherwise, it was just part of an expect. So I'm storing the users in the API users. So those will be the users that are returned here at the end.
And so you only have 5 in your database. Is that what it is?
There are only 5 in here in this file, right?
Because that's why you're saying expecting 5.
So I have 1 in the database and 5 are coming from the API. So what I'm saying is I'm expecting 5 from the APIs.
Yeah.
But also I'm expecting after the synchronization is done to have 5 in the database as well.
Because you're overriding 1?
Because I'm synchronizing and overwriting. Yes, exactly. So I'm not kind of adding another one with the same Vonage ID, right? The synchronization is done based on Vonage ID. Yeah. So what I'm doing is I'm reloading this object from the database, make sure that I get fresh data. And then I'm checking if the name is what I have in the file. So it's effectively this name here.
Anis, yeah.
And then the display name is the same, right? Whatever I have in that file. And then this is random data that's generated actually in the next step when I create users, and that's why is that random stuff. I didn't pick it up. It just And then I make sure that for that user 1, I actually update the sync hat as well, right? So I'm not checking if the other 4s have exactly the same property as in the file because that's kind of obsolete, right? Yeah. If the first one gets
because that's just making sure that the person that was there, you're synchronizing it still there, pretty much.
Correct. And it gets the new data from the API because things might have changed. There. Cool. So this is the one of the tests, right? So this is the success path. Right. And then I'm testing invalid responses. And in here, I'm not using the file anymore, but I'm returning different weird data. So what happens if I get a null response from the data source?
And that was the whole thing with the return an array if whatever these criteria weren't met.
Correct. So effectively, I'm testing different parts of this. So testing this, I'm testing this, I'm testing this thing here. You'll see that I kind of not have users in the return response and so on. So I have null as a response, empty string as a response, right? So I don't want my code to kind of get different kind of random stuff based on things if API call fail. And then I have an empty JSON, and then I have an embedded, but it's not an object, it's just a string. And then I have an embedded as an object, but it doesn't have a user key. And then I have embedded, but with a user as a string. And then if you have different things, then it's kind of different, right? So those are the errors, and this is why getting all these different things. So retrieve users, you'll get retrieve users. Actually, probably this should say success. Success. And then you have synchronizing successful users, and then you have errors, and it and probably you don't need users here because it's part of the same thing. I tend to make it descriptive, but sometimes when you group it, it kind of loses its meaning.
I feel you. Yeah, because that whole thing is under retrieve users. Makes sense.
Correct. Yeah. So that's kind of how I tested it. So it's a bit more convoluted, but having that external data source allows me to mock it very easily and kind of run the tests, but still have a test to test the live data, the live conversation API.
Oh yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, because you want to get as much coverage as possible.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it makes sense. That's good.
Yeah. Cool. So that was the So one thing we didn't actually cover here is we did the pagination, but then this is the part that does synchronization, right? So what it does, it looks at the local users. It tries to find one with a Vonage API, same as the ID that comes from the API. And then if it doesn't find the local user, it creates one, and then it puts the name, the display name, and then the sync that.
Okay.
Probably one thing I should test here, because I feel like I didn't test it, is what happened. I want to make sure that kind of one of the new users has all the properties inserted, because that's one thing I don't test. I'm testing this part, but I'm not testing this part. So I can easily have this, right? Or put some random name in here. Actually, let's leave it like that and see what happens, right? Because this still creates a user. It satisfies the Vonage ID and name existing.
Yeah, but it doesn't have like the date, the sync at, and everything.
Yeah, I can even do this, to be honest. Right. So that means actually let's write that test, because I think it's useful to understand the thinking behind that. So we'll get another user. We'll call it user 2. Actually, in this case, we don't create it. It gets created. We need to find it. So user find by, and then Vonage ID, and then let's pick one that is not this, that ends in AAAE. Sorry, EAAE. So let's pick this one. Yeah, because this is the first one that we have. So let's pick this one. Oops. So we want to test. So we expect user to not be null. So this will fail now, because we don't insert that Vonage ID. So let's run just this test. So that will be 43. I'm just going to move this a bit, because yeah. Right, so that fails because it doesn't find that user. In fact, it fails even earlier because we insert the user with the same test ID, and it can't, because one of the conditions for Vonage ID is to be unique.
Yeah.
So it actually has the first one and then adds one as a test, and the subsequent ones can't be added because the test already exists. So it breaks the uniqueness of the Vonage ID.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, the Vonage ID needs to be unique. So when you add for new users, you try to add 4 users with the same Vonage ID as test. That will fail.
Yeah.
So let's put it back, and this will actually pass the test, right? Because
names need to be unique. Yeah.
Yeah. I think actually it won't pass the test either, because the name needs to be unique as well. Yeah, you're right. So again, exactly the same problem, right? So you can play the devil advocate.
Maybe display name or something, or
no, we can pass something random here, but that will kind of be pointless, right? So let's put it back.
Oh no, I'm just saying, like, if you wanted to try, like, because display name can be not unique or what have you. If you wanted to just put that as test or something,
you still need to pass the name because it's required.
Oh yeah, because you need that. Yeah.
So this will now work. Oh, it doesn't. Why does it?
That's synchronized users.
Did we miss a character when we copied the stuff? Oh, that's the name. Sorry, we need the ID.
ID. Okay.
That was the name. Oops. That was because the user ID always starts with ESR. So yeah, we should have actually been able to.
Okay, Vonage. Okay, yeah.
So now we should work. Right, and then we need to test exactly the same thing that we have here, but for this one. But in addition to this, I want to test that the name is set properly as well, because name is another one that gets set. Right, because in this case, actually it's here, so the same thing. So let's see. The name of this one should be this thing. So we'll put it here. And then the display name will be this one.
PhD, fancy.
Yeah, it puts titles as well. So normally, if I don't depend on a live API, I tend not to hard code stuff. I'm completely against hard coding stuff. But this one is data that is actually from. I could probably generate that JSON every time I need to use it, but that means you have to inject data inside, test it, and then it's a bit more complicated. So that way, I hard code it. I make sure that if that's a response, this is what I get. And if there is an error later on, I'll add it as another edge case. So this will work up to display name because we don't insert the display name or the sync that. So it fails the first time when it doesn't find something. Right? So it fails in that kind of display name. Why does it?
Yeah, it's looking for.
Oh, we're testing user 1, not user 2.
Oh, there you go.
It should be null. That's why I was a bit confused because we don't pass anything in, so it should be. It should return null. Yeah, so we got null, but we're expecting this. So that means that if we put back the display name of the sync, now the test will pass.
Because that's the new user being added.
Exactly. Yeah, so I feel now that I've tested all the different scenarios. So I have both the branches when you look for a user are tested now. Does it make sense?
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, looks good. Yeah. So just real quick, the sync at to be more than 10 seconds ago.
Yeah.
How does that work?
So greater than or equal is actually a method name. You can use any characters in a method name in Ruby. So, so what expect does is actually expect to. It does a sort of test against something, right?
Yeah.
And test that particular value is greater than 10 seconds ago, which is a timestamp. And when you do testing, it converts to the kind of time since epoch. And it does kind of that thing. But this greater than is part of a matchers that you have in rspec.
Okay.
So it's a method. That's where it gets confused.
Yeah, so 10 seconds ago is not this time? Or
no, 10 seconds ago means literally the time 10 seconds ago from running this test.
From running it. So
yeah.
But what if it takes, I guess, longer or shorter than 10 seconds?
Yeah, that's a possibility, and that's why I use 10 seconds. It shouldn't, because it's simply just inserting stuff in the database, right?
Okay.
So what I wanted to test is if I tested in the last 10 seconds. And the difference is I want to make sure that I've updated that value so it's not null. Okay. This is not the best way to do it by far, but it's kind of an easy way to test things, right? Because sync is being updated when you insert stuff in the database. So when you run the test, you expect that sync to be very, very close to now. So testing that it's older than 10 seconds. Sorry, it's younger than 10 seconds ago.
Yeah.
It's always working if you're updating it now, and that's why I use 10 rather than 1. Sometimes things can, but 10 seconds ago, and I'm fairly certain that test works properly.
Okay.
Hey, Exy, how are you?
Hey, what's up?
How are you, Exy? Hope you're having a good start of the week. We're having some fun with testing and and Ruby and discovering different things.
Learn a bunch about Ruby.
Yeah.
Nice.
So so I'm fairly confident the synchronization works now properly. So so what we can do is we can test again the whole thing. So we're testing 28, right? So making sure that we have. Sorry, I'm just getting alerts on my watch and trying to make sure that everything is okay. Cool. Yeah, so that's retrieving users.
Looks good.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah. Actually, let me save it and run it again, just in case. It shouldn't make any difference, but just in case. Cool. So the other thing that I've added was, or one of the other things that I added was create user. So in this case, it's exactly the same setup. So when you create a user, you either return a user or return null if there's an error. And the reason I return different data types is because you can't return an empty user. It doesn't make sense, right? So if Exy says his first day back from a week of vacation, rested and ready to rock. That sounds really good. I'm glad you rested. Yeah, this is rspec we're doing. It's rspec with rspec mock, I believe, with factory bot and with faker for generating random data. So create users kind of works in the same way. If you don't get a response, you return null. If you can't make up, can't tell what the JSON is, you return null. If a user, so if a JSON you return doesn't have an ID and the name, you also return null. That means something really weird is happening. And the reason for that is because when you create a user, let's say users, create a user, you always get the ID and the name. This has been updated, and actually in version 03, get the name of display name.
Oh, that's cool.
So you always need the ID because you need to insert it in the database, obviously, and the name because it needs to be unique.
That's helpful.
X is saying Faker and Factory Bot are the best. Yes, they are. I definitely enjoy working with them because it makes your life so much easier. I think we're using, let's see. So we're using Guard as well. I'm not sure if you use Guard. Factory Bot Rails, obviously, to work with Factory Bot. Faker, and I'm using Guard Live Reload. So this is something that one of viewers in my stream showed me. It's really interesting because this is not really for testing, but it's for development. What that does, it effectively reloads the web page if you change a view. So Guard not only does the testing, but actually reloads the page a bit like how Nodmon does. I'm not sure if you use Nodmon, Dwayne.
Yeah, yeah.
So it creates that socket and kind of checks out and uploads and reloads the page, and it saves a couple of command R's, right, to reload the page, I guess. But it's something that I haven't seen before, and it was really, really interesting to see.
That's cool.
Yes, I do have. We can use Guard to run that, and I have this Guard file here that kind of checks the different things and reruns the tests. So if I change the views, reruns the view, the helpers, and so on. And the same thing for the support files and all the other stuff. So it's just standard stuff, nothing fancy. But also Guard kind of runs a lot of other stuff on top of it. So yeah, it's running all the time. But now I'm not running it mainly because I'm showing Dwayne what I did kind of in my own stream to kind of speed up this process. Cool. So create users. Kind of we explain what it is. So I'll show you the tests because they're slightly different. So that was retrieve users. I'm going to fold that, and then create users is the same thing. So create users. Generating. This should probably say each rather than all. So this is one of the features of rspec. It generates random data, but it can generate random data just once or before each test. So in here, where is it? Actually, probably this can be. Yeah, it's good to keep it before each one, just to make sure that you get kind of fresh data all the time. So the reason I modified before each is because I want random data all the time, and I don't want to have any kind of crossovers between tests. Although rspec actually empties the database and recreates the database before each test.
Oh, okay.
So it starts with a fresh set from the database. So this is the live stuff we discussed earlier, remember? So it's the same parameter. So what I'm doing here is I'm loading the Vonage users from the API. I'm storing the count. I'm calling create. Then I'm getting the users again. I make sure that I'm getting +1 users.
Okay.
I can probably take this further and make sure that the name of display name is the right one and put in there. Actually, we can probably do this now. So that will be 102. So let's make sure that. So that calls. I want to show you the response. That's why I'm looking for stuff here. So we can probably, because I want to see what users gets created, right? So I can probably, actually, I'll put it in here, because that means if something goes wrong. Actually, no, let's put it at the top, because if something goes wrong, I want to see. So let's create a user and see what we get. All examples will filter out. Did I use the wrong? Conversation is API. Oh, I didn't use run live, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask, yes, because you want to do it from the
Exactly,
actual database. Okay.
Correct.
They make an actual call.
X is saying, I think it's very fancy to have your tests run constantly. It's very interesting, and I really enjoying it all the time, because and I think this will be even better with the new Macs when we're going to get the new ones, the M1's one, because over there, actually, the access to resources is much faster, so the tests will run faster. But it's nice to see things being tested as you save the tests, because that makes kind of that feedback loop much faster, and you get that kind of a error, or kind of a completion stuff happening much faster.
I think we can do that. Was it Mocha or Jest or something? I think does that. I think you can do that.
Yeah.
Like as you're working on it, it will run the tests and let you know if you're failing any.
Yeah. Unfortunately, God doesn't know to run just part of a test, because that will be even amazing. So to do a diff between the last saved version of a file and the version you saved now, and kind of run only the tests that are touched by that change. Yeah. It runs the entire file. So sometimes when you test a controller that has lots of different things, it's kind of hard.
For a while.
Yeah. What I tend to do, actually, that's a good, I didn't think of this, but I can use this if to turn off certain things. And if I work only on a part of a controller, I can only test that one, and then put that if back and kind of put the whole thing back. I didn't think of that, but yeah, I can probably use that. What I tend to do is either comment out, or take that file and put it into different kind of a temporary file. Sorry, take the test that I already wrote and passing into a different file, work on the stuff that I have, and then put the stuff back, and then take the whole thing, put it away, and kind of write new stuff. So that way it makes the things faster.
Faster, yeah.
So does
look like we just got a president joining the V app. So it looks like President Ivory Watts.
Oh, oh yes,
nice.
Yeah, we did. This is.
It's fancy now. Look at that.
What I was telling you earlier. Yeah, it just generates random stuff. So
made the big leagues.
Yeah, bigly. Yeah. So probably one thing we can do is we can. How do we test if this is actually working properly? Because we get the structure back from the API, but we get the whole. Actually, it returns the user here, right? So this can be the new user. So we can test if it's so expect new user dot name to equal, and we have a name here. I think this is what it can do. Yeah, and display name, the same thing for display name.
Okay, you're just checking to make sure that what was added, like the new user, is what's in the database or something,
so
right?
This effectively checks that the value that we passed here, make it all the way to the data source that pass it on to the APIs, to the live API, and then when the stuff that gets returned back from the response has the right data in it.
Yeah, so the same name, display name. And then what about ID? Do you want to do ID also, or?
We don't know the ID because that comes from that's generated by the Vonage API.
Oh, because right there, the create user has a ID, right?
Yeah, but we can't set this on up. We get it back.
Oh, okay. So, yeah. Okay, yeah, you're right.
We will have it because kind of based on this condition.
Okay.
And actually, we're going to test that as part of testing the response. But in this case, we're going to assume we have the right response.
Okay.
I mean, we can do things like expect user ID to
Not null or something like that.
we can do be falsy
Okay.
if we want to be fancy. That literally says if it's null, is false, right? So
Okay.
so let's test it again. 102. X is asking, does rspec run tests parallel as well? I don't know, actually. That's a good point. Sorry, this is to be truthy, not falsy, because we expect an answer. We don't expect it to be null, right?
Okay.
Truthy, like that. Because this is failing because we get an ID back and we test
Could you
it
actually get
before.
one?
Yeah, so truth. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we want it to be truthy, to have something in there, because that's what we want to put in the database as Vonage ID. So that's testing the live one, right? So we have a Troy JD. I'm not sure what JD stands for.
Oh, Juris Doctor. It's like a lawyer, I think.
Excuse me. Interesting. Yeah, it has a lot of titles in there. Actually, that's a good point. Let's find out if rspec parallel. Come on. So if this is from 2019.
Oh, that's a guy. He's a detective.
Oh yeah, that's Colombo, isn't it?
Colombo, yes. I was gonna say like Matlock or something.
Now Colombo is the one that plays being dumb and then just always kind of outsmarts people. So I'm guessing this is a library that you can use. Yeah, so the difference is because it runs in parallel, you need to run a different database.
Okay.
I'm guessing you can specify how many processes you have because you need to create the databases beforehand. And then you prepare the database and then you run the tests. And that, yeah, so you can see the difference. So it runs it on different CPUs. So the more CPUs you have, the greater it becomes. Yeah, because technically the tests shouldn't be run in a particular order. All tests should be independent and not kind of in a certain.
Depend on another.
This is one problem that Xcode has, and they fixed it for a while, and then they kind of didn't fix it. They kind of put it back in the wrong way. So in Xcode, when you define tests in Swift, it runs them in alphabetical order, which is really bad because I don't know why. It's just the way they pick the tests from the file. I think in here it runs in the order you define them, but as long as you write them so they don't have dependencies, you don't rely on data
coming from another test,
coming from another test or already being there. And you need to assume that you start from a blank state all the time, and you don't add things in.
Yep.
Yeah. So. Sorry, give me just 1 second. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so I think that there are ways to do it, XC. And probably this makes sense if you want to have a CI that runs a lot of tests. I mean, I had a personal project that has tests in the thousands.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah. It's quite interesting. I think I have one that runs for about 14 minutes, all the tests. And this is why I don't want to run all of them. But it's thousands, and it tests everything. So it has tests for models, for integration, for kind of views you test. In a Rails app, for example, you can even test mailers. So it has a Rails ships with a library that can kind of provides a templating system to email. So it provides HTML and text parts,
cool.
and it's done in a certain way. And you can test that, and you can write tests for that as well. And you can write tests for the whole stuff if a mail is sent, and tests for each view. So for HTML and so you can make it really, really you can
really
test
granular.
Nice. Yeah. Cool. So I think we improve this. And then, so what do we have here? So first of all, we're going to get the live one and make sure that we get the right stuff. And then I'm testing success. And this is, again, it loads from users create success. So
which
this
was
is
in your, right there,
one.
your fixtures.
So this one returns exactly the same thing as this thing. Obviously, it's hard-coded, so it's actually one of the ones you saw before.
The first one
of
that you're testing.
Yeah. And
because you need that one to be able to run the test, because you can't just like run from nothing, right? Like you need to be able to create a user.
Yeah, you need a kind of a sort of success data scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we effectively put one of the scenarios that you get. So if it's just a standard with ID, name, display name, and all the properties you get back.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm testing here is actually what we why do we get the I'm testing effectively this one shouldn't be here because I'm testing that exists in this file. Probably what I should have is this link I should test here. Right, so I'm testing that the underscore links self exists when it comes from the JSON.
Okay.
So this one, the success, what this one does, it effectively just tests that particular data is correct.
Okay.
Right, so it tests that I actually get a user.
Okay.
So you have different errors. You have the null response, you have empty response, you have empty JSON response. And I've just realized here, one thing we're not testing is we're not testing that data makes it in the database. But we didn't store it in the database. So actually, that's exactly where I ended up my stream, right? So
okay.
I ended up the reason I had those tests is because I did this to get the data for create users, and then get the data for the users because I had an empty list of users initially.
Okay.
So to get the data, I had to create some users first.
Yeah.
Okay. So now what we need to do is to kind of make sure that user is synchronized to the database.
Okay. You want to make sure that it was so you'd have to do like a find by or something, or
yeah. So I think it's exactly the same thing as this one, like that. It's very similar to this code. So this is the user here. If a local user is null, you create one. So I'm going to actually call this API user just to make it a bit easier. Yeah. So it creates based on the name, display name, and sync is now. If it exists, you just update it based on the same thing. And I think it should return the local user. I don't care about the
API one.
API user, yeah. I think hold on, I did something wrong. I wanted this to be API user, this to be API user, this to be API user, this to be API user.
I was going to say, this didn't change,
So this is another thing I'm trying to avoid. If I have two types of users, I'm trying to avoid calling one user and the other one something else.
Yeah.
I tend to call them completely different. Like one is API user, the other one is local user. So I don't need to use them by mistake.
Yeah.
And because we're returning the local user, that means we can't test. Where is it? We can't test this link stuff because that won't be transpiled to the local user. And this is the Vonage ID, right? Because that will be the local user now that we're testing.
Okay.
So the local user gets the ID from the local user is the Vonage ID in the database, which is the ID that was returned by the Conversation API. Actually saying one app at work takes 20 minutes to run Cucumber tests. Yeah, Cucumber is actually something else that you can add, and Cucumber tests the interface. So I believe you can even test JavaScript with Cucumber. So what it does, it creates a V8 machine in the memory, and it reads the page like a browser, and it tests the page so you can click check boxes, you can click buttons, you can do a lot of stuff.
There's one Python. It begins with an S, and I think it's also using like JavaScript. I can't believe I forgot the name of it. There's a new one, Puppeteer, that I've been kind of using.
Yeah.
But what was the one with it? See now. Oh, now it's gonna. Hold on. I'll look it up. But yeah, there was a
Selenium.
Selenium. Thank you. Yes, Selenium.
Selenium. Yeah.
For some reason, I wanted to say like skeleton, but yeah, Selenium. Yeah. Exactly.
If I'm not mistaken, I think Cucumber uses Selenium behind the scenes. Is that right, Exy? I'm not very familiar with that side of things. But that's mainly for testing the interface.
Oh, that's cool. So then, okay, so like deploys to Heroku and you test it on that, or?
You can test it locally because it's just a headless Chrome. So
he said on Heroku or what have you. So
that's Heroku CI/CD. Yeah, so Heroku, you can in the same. We're using GitHub Actions to do stuff. You can have something similar in Heroku.
That's cool.
It's kind of part of their integration, kind of pipeline, continuous integration stuff.
It just runs on Heroku. Okay.
Yeah, I think Heroku gives you ability to run tests before deploy, and then if it fails, it doesn't deploy, and you can revert back. I think Heroku remembers all the previous versions, so you can actually go back and deploy a machine back to full JS capabilities. Yeah.
Nice.
That sounds right. Yeah, it can run a lot of tests, and it makes it really really nice. Cool. So now we have this one, and this will fail now because we don't have kind of the synchronization part, right? So what I'm going to want to do is to rerun all the tests for create users without live in order to make sure that I get all the stuff done properly.
Okay.
Right. So what I'll do is I'll run all the tests without run live from 96. So this seems to work. So we have that put response here, which we don't necessarily want.
You can tell it's not live because it came back with Donald McLaughlin.
Yeah, it's the one from the database. Yeah, actually, we probably want to store this because we're going to test the new user against these properties. Right, so I'm going to store this. So basically, what success means is, so in this case, it's a completely new user. So I'm going to say success new user. So we're passing the name and display name, and we're returning this. Yeah, we don't really care about this name and display name because we're reading from the file. So it's not being returned, rightly from the file. But the user that gets returned here should have this property.
New user or something.
No, because it's the user, right? So I mean, it gets returned by create user. So we expect it not to be null, and we expect this to equal. Oops. So to equal this. Right, so then we expect
that has to be a string or something, right?
Oh yeah, I missed the start thing. Yeah, so we expect the name to be this, right? And then we expect the.
You need the front.
Oh, did I delete it? Yeah, I think it gets deleted automatically by something when I delete that one. And this is the display name. Another thing we want to test here is if we're actually creating users. So before here, so we expect user.all.count to equal 0. I mean, in this case, it's hard-coded. So usually I don't do it like this, but it's a simple test, so it makes sense. So usually I store this as a before count, and I make sure that after count is before count plus 1.
Okay, so you're going to do a +1 now, or?
So I'm just going to use hard-coded like 0 and 1.
Yeah.
I think it's a simple test here.
Yeah, because it's a new.
Yeah. So this should work. So let's make sure that it's doing things properly. So it's failing because the ID. Oh, it's not ID, but we want Vonage ID. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the ID generated internally. That's why it kind of it jumped at me.
So you have like 169 users now in your database.
It depends how the database gets purged every so often. X is saying Heroku runs those tests before all environments launch, including tests prior to staging. That's nice. So you have
cool.
both staging and production on Heroku. That's really good. Cool. So that works. The other scenario we have is existing user, right? So what happens if, and this shouldn't be a case because we should only create users when we have a new user creating for the interface, right? So we shouldn't have a case where the user already exists in the database.
Because you just want to update it or whatever, right?
Yeah. Actually, that's weird because, yeah, this is one of the exception scenarios, right? You don't expect a new user that you create to already exist with that Vonage ID in the database.
Yeah, because
it just doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah, it's supposed to be unique.
Exactly. So it depends how we want to handle this. Do we want just to play along and say, okay, maybe something went wrong, let's just update it and trust the Vonage API? Or we can say, actually, this is really weird, let's throw an exception. I tend to trust the Vonage API more because it's has way more tests around it. And this case should never happen, but just in case.
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
What
I'm saying? So let's test with the existing user. So this one will be very similar to the tests we did before. In here, we've retrieved users. So we created this user, remember? And we had the synchronization, so we're going to do exactly the same thing here. So that's rule success, existing user. So here we're going to create it with this. Oh, it's the same ID. That's good. So user one, synchronize. Okay. So let's not do this. So we don't care about that user gets returned, but we want the user one to reload. And all these tests, so we don't need this, but all these tests should, and probably this one should be, oh no, we already have this here. We just have one. Right, so actually, no, this one needs to be after create user. So what this will do is we'll create the user with that ID. We don't care about all the other properties. Synchronization is defined as 10 minutes ago, so this will pass. We have one user in the database. We're going to mock the thing. We create the user. We still have one user in the database, so this test
should still be one person. Yeah,
meaning we reload it. Yeah, and then we test the whole different things here.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's run the tests and see how it's.
So we create a new user, but it has the same Vonage ID, and then we want to So you're basically kind of like updating and making sure it's updated and not added a new user.
Correct. Yeah. Awesome.
That's cool. Per branch staging.
Yeah. So when they do releases, I'm guessing they tagging branches as a release, or they use the branch as a release name, and then they stage that particular branch, make sure it's right, and then merge that into dev or into kind of main, kind of redo the whole thing. Yeah, it sounds like a really good environment. Is the way it should be. Back in the day, there was, I think it's still happening, a project called Capistrano, was it?
It's like a bird or something, right?
It's a small animal, isn't it? Yeah, it's still going. Yeah, I think Capistrano is like a small. Is it a bird?
I thought it was a. Yeah, there it is. Like I guess it's similar to a swallow. I don't know.
I thought it's a. Yeah, I thought it was like a small animal. Maybe I'm.
Yeah, I thought it was like a small bird.
I'm confusing it with capybara. It's a different thing.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
But yeah, I think Capistrano is. It was built by someone that was working. Yeah, James Buck. He used to work for 37 Signals, which is now Basecamp. and it was part of Ruby core, Rails core. Capybara, not small. Yeah, Capybara is quite big. Capistrano is a tool where you can actually do deployments from a command line.
Okay.
And so if you own your own servers, if you don't go through Heroku, but just go straight to the server like SSH. So we're talking, this was released a long time ago. The first version. So what was happening is you could write this DSL that will run the tests before you do the deployments, and also it will remember the last 3 deployments you had.
Okay.
And you can, if something was bad, you can literally from the command line switch all your production servers back to a previous version on the fly. It'll just change symlink. So it was really, really clever to deploy across multiple machines and be able to control it like that.
Cool.
Yeah, it was. I think it's still working.
Pre the whole serverless phase and
this was straight to your server sort of SSH thing. I think it was released in 2006. They changed from Switch Tower to Capistrano, so it was 2005, 2006 probably. But yeah, it was very. It's quite an interesting tool, but it's kind of obsolete now because a lot of people use kind of servers like Heroku and AWS, and they do deployments, like DigitalOcean, they do deployments really straight on the server, and all the CI and stuff is already baked in there.
Yeah.
You're actually saying they're leveraging GitLab and Heroku for all the CI/CD, so it's much less work for you. Yes, yeah, I agree. I agree. Anything you can delegate to a machine, they can do it so much better. They can run repeat tasks so much kind of better than we can as humans. So.
Oh no, you're good, XD. Yeah, GitLab, they have like really good CI/CD stuff built in. Like it's I'm a fan.
No, you're not distracting, XD. So this is actually a really good talk because we can see different tools. So inside the client SDK, me and Dwayne are part of. We work with JavaScript, iOS, so Swift, Objective-C, Android, Kotlin, Java, and probably TypeScript as well, and some of the stuff Michael is doing. So we actually do a whole range of different languages and tools and frameworks and whatever. It's always interesting to see the differences between different platforms and see
what's out there.
Yeah, and how we can leverage different things. And and nothing is new in the development world. Everything is a remix, right? Everything is open source. If you look like new things like Kotlin and Swift, they borrow a lot of things from everything. Like Swift now is trying to implement async, the same syntax, literally async await, the same syntax that we have in JavaScript, because it works. So we have different ways of doing things with callbacks and delegates and a lot of other stuff. It turns out that if you do async await, it's so much easier to understand, and you have just multi-threading, and it can do lots of different things. So CI/CD with GitLab and K8s. I'm not sure what K8 is.
Like Kubernetes and stuff?
Is that what it means?
I think so.
Yeah, I never used Kubernetes, to be honest, so I'm not...
One of my previous jobs, we had like the DevOps person, and just to kind of watch them work with the Kubernetes and spinning up clusters and doing these things, and it was amazing. It was kind of amazing. I was like, I can see why y'all get paid so much money. It's a lot.
Yeah, and having a good person that can actually spin those servers on demand and kind of minimize the amount of money you pay per service, and only kind of have what you need, maybe with a bit of a plus just for, if you have an increase in demand, a sharp increase in demand. But yeah,
they would say
it's amazing.
A lot. Provision is like the key word. They would say like, we're provisioning this and provisioning that, and I agree with that, Ben.
Yeah, I think he likes Rails as well. So yeah, Kubernetes is agnostic, and it is amazing. There's a bit of a love happening in the chat now, which we absolutely love as well. So
nice.
Yeah.
All about love.
Thank you for joining, Ben. Hope you're well. Hope things are going well where you are. Cool. So we tested the existing, right, the success with existing user and new user. Then we have the error for null response, empty string response, and
An empty object.
an empty object. I guess it'll be interesting to see if we pass something that has maybe the name but not the ID. So you can have you can probably use single quotes. So you can use double inside. So you can have like name test. So this should fail as well, right? So let's test this. Yeah, so effectively that bit tests this line here.
Okay. Yeah.
And then maybe not empty, but invalid object response no ID. Maybe do the same thing for. I mean, a lot of this are kind of. At some point, you'll kind of assume that, you know what, it's not worth writing this test because they will always be there.
Well, I mean, it's just in case kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good to run the tests and see what's happening. All right, so this is creating the user. So this will happen when we register users. So in this case, if you already have actually, what will it happen if the API returns? And I'm sorry for jumping between dark background and white background. I think it's probably bad on the eyes, but so if you create a user that exists already, what's happening?
We got a question from
yes.
Exy. First of all, Ben, I don't know what turkey pie you're talking about, but my Thanksgiving pie, I don't know what that's about. I don't. We didn't have pie.
Thanksgiving pie. I think Benjamin. I think he grew up in New York.
No, well, right now he's in St. Louis, I believe. Like at the moment, and he's saying it's cold there, I guess. And
okay.
Exy is saying it's cold in Arizona.
Yeah,
like 19 degrees, which is I don't understand how that happens. I thought Arizona was a desert, huh?
Is that centigrade or Fahrenheit?
Fahrenheit.
Oh, so that's really cold. That's
so super cold.
Kind of below freezing, like -5 or something. C. Yeah.
For you, yes. And so that's pretty cold, and that doesn't make any sense because that's like a desert.
Yeah.
But so the Exy had a question.
How do you decide when you're testing the framework versus testing your code? How do you cut out tests which test the framework? I don't think you should test the framework. I think that's it. So those are two different things that you should do. One is you should qualify frameworks before you actually use it, and you shouldn't use a framework that is not tested. And if it's not tested, if you really want to use it, you should write tests and submit it as an open source thing. I don't think you should test things from the framework inside the test for your app. I think that's the wrong place to put it. You should test things that you added inside your app,
like your logic and everything.
Yeah. So you should effectively test the code that you're writing, nothing else. In the same way, you shouldn't test internals for Rails. Right? You should only test things that you do. One day I'm gonna update the Streamlabs, Ben, but I think it's left over from Lorna's stuff last week. So this is not happening today, but this happened last week. Lorna showed a bit of a Go SDK using OpenAPI. You should definitely go and rewatch that video. She has a lot of great stuff in there.
Go's pretty cool language also.
He's up in the mountains, so that kind of explains things, right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. There you go. Yeah.
So, what's 19 Fahrenheit to Celsius? I think that's minus 7. Okay, so it's cold.
And then Arizona sometimes gets these dust storms. Like I saw like a YouTube video where it looked like just from. Have you ever seen the movie The Mummy? And it's like they're being chased by the big sandstorm. Like it looked like that, and I was like, wow,
Whoa,
it's kind of amazing.
wow. I'm not sure what pie is Ben alluding to.
Well,
Is
no,
that
like
something
some people have
specific?
like sweet potato pie or pumpkin pie during Thanksgiving.
Ah, I see. So it's probably some regions have specific pies to do with
Yeah,
Thanksgiving.
like we didn't have like sometimes we'll have pie, but no, we didn't have pie this time.
So I think it's worth clarifying what is a pie, because that is not the same thing that the pie we have in the UK.
What kind of pie do you have in the UK? Like meat pie or something, right? Or
Yeah, but I mean, you have some of that, but you don't really call it pie. Usually a pie is something sweet, not savory. But you have savory pies as well. But
yeah,
most
I
people
mean,
say something sweet.
yeah,
But I
like
think
there's like
you
apple
call
pie and
you call pie anything that's kind of baked and it has pastry in it, right?
I guess I'm not really like well versed on the subject. So whatever it says on the box is pretty much what I go with. So they call it a pie. I'm like, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, we have minced meat pie actually at Christmas, but it doesn't have meat or mince. It's literally something else completely. Yeah, probably we're the worst people in the world to talk about cooking, because I never cook. So,
Yeah, there's something with an HXE. I think it's Haboob or something like that, where it was just, I was amazed. I was like, wow.
oh, that's interesting.
Like it knocked out like all light. Like you couldn't see or anything. Like it was bad.
Oh, something like this. Oh,
Yes.
wow. This is just crazy. I don't want to go to
Yeah.
game mails. I'm going to pick something else.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
This is just crazy. So this is in Texas.
Yes.
It just looks like that's exactly it. I think you describe it probably best. It's a scene from The Mummy.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
So
I've heard of Flagstaff. Okay, so yes. Okay.
Yeah, actually is actually in a ski resort. So actually being -7°C, it actually makes perfect sense, and it's probably the best temperature to have, because you don't want to be very cold, but you still want to have you want to have snow, and you
so
have
high
something
up. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know like Arizona got that high. Okay.
2,000 meters. Okay, that's not bad at all. Yeah. Actually, one thing that I forgot to mention, because I had this open initially, and I wanted to give a shout out to our colleague Abdul, because he wrote some interesting things. And he did this with Swift and Vapor, but this is not really touching what we're doing here. So he used Verify with Vapor, which is a framework in Swift. So basically, it's what Rails is to Ruby, Vapor is to Swift. So he built a whole thing, and it's a really interesting it's a really interesting tutorial. Oh, look what we have here.
Oh, look at that.
We have it's actually in Learn Dev. We have we're live on Twitch.
Huh.
I say hi to myself there. Yay! Mom on
Nice.
TV.
Yeah, they've been putting a lot of work into the new platform. Have we talked about that? The new learn.vonage.com? Like,
even if we did, we need to talk about it again, because Luke did an amazing job here.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how good it is.
Wow. Okay. Nice. So you can just watch us and learn while you're
there's this
awesome.
little button here as well.
Very
This
nice.
is really good. So every time we are live on Twitch, you can actually see it on the platform. This is really nice. Well done, Luke. This is really good.
Wow.
I'm gonna send Luke some applause points, because I think this is really clever. This is a nice touch. But the other thing I wanted to show you is this another blog post that Abdul wrote 2 weeks ago, or even 19 days ago. I think something is wrong with my connection. Where is it? I think
it moved. Yeah. Oh, no. Well, you can look it up by him. So just click on his face. Like it should go to all his different.
Yeah, articles. I think we just published new things, because this got moved here as well.
Yeah.
So
I think if you click on his face, it'll take you to all his articles, so you can just pick one.
Yeah. So this one here, tutorial. So this is something that we're gonna add in our V app. I'm not sure if we want to use SwiftUI, but he used AWS Lambda to have a webhook that you can use with phone calls, right? But it's interesting that he used also SwiftUI, which is this new craziness in the iOS world, where you build the interface literally as you type. So the interface will be, I'm not sure where it is. Yeah, something like this. You construct views. So if you use SwiftUI, kind of people will understand what it is. But it's a really clever tutorial. So yeah, you get dizzy from that screenshot. Luke is saying, actually saying, Luke put that together as a serverless Netflix function. Oh, thank you, Exy. I didn't know that was on our blog. I always love when people come back and tell us things that are happening, because we have so many different things. You can't really kind of keep up with everything.
There's a lot of knowledge being dropped on the blogs.
Yeah. Actually, how do I copy that? Oh, it's on dev 2, actually. It's not on Vonage. So dev 2, Vonage dev /netlify function for, oops, I'm not gonna, okay. Vonage netlify function. Site.
Put Twitch, maybe?
Site dev 2. There you go.
There you go. Oh yeah, I did see that somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, this is interesting. So this is how Luke did it. So yeah, it's he's amazing. He did so much work on this Learn Vonage platform. It's just the speed of it is just crazy. When you jump between different kind of pages and loads the. I think he was optimizing the images so you can get it based on the width of your screen and kind of not have to load lots of things in the same time and so on.
A lot of thought went into it.
Yeah. But it's a great platform. Cool. Let's kind of test the delete as well. So I think I've started the delete as well. So this one generates a user ID, the name, and I'm not sure why I do all of these, but we'll find out in a second. So this creates the user.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually relies on the user being there, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't know what the user is.
So that's why you're creating a fake one, so just to delete it and make sure it's gone.
Oh, I see. That's why we use name and display name. You're right. So we're creating that one. We get the users. We store the before count because this is the live API, so we don't know what's happening. Mm-hmm. We don't know how many we already have. Making sure the count is greater than 0. What if it's the first one? Oh, yeah. If it's the first one, you create one, so you have at least one. Mm-hmm. Okay, fair point. But we can probably do this rather than do the count again, and not having to. Just an extra operation is not a massive thing. So the before count is greater than 0. Then we're getting the first user from here. Why do we get the first user?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what, because wouldn't it be the person that's...
but we don't care if we're deleting the same user or a different user.
Oh.
so okay. What we're saying is we want to make sure that we have at least one.
Oh, okay. I thought you were deleting the user you just created. So okay.
Probably we could have done that, but that's a good point, because that means we don't randomly affect the API.
Yeah, like you wouldn't just randomly delete. Yeah, like you'd make sure it's that same person that got deleted.
Okay. Okay, I'll add a to-do here.
So, yeah, would that be like a find by, like users dot find by?
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. So create users. Actually, when you create the user, this stores it in the database, right? So we can actually get the ID from the database.
Okay.
So what we can do is we don't care about this. Actually, this will be the users in the database.
Mm-hmm.
So what we can do is the user ID, we can get user find by, so let's get just one user, find by, and we want to find it by name, and we want to pass the name like that. We expect the user to not be null. Oops, not Bill, null. We kind of don't want to test this because we know we're going to have it there, and this will be the Vonage ID, right? Because we're passing the Vonage ID back to the delete user.
Okay.
And then we're synchronizing again. So this should synchronize again.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, we can do even better. Let's store the users that we have. Yeah, that's actually.
Is that what users equals Vonage.users?
So I'm trying to think. So what we want to do is because we don't know how many users we have, so this will be completely random from the live API. We want to create one to have at least one in the database and also delete that, right? Delete the same user. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're going to create one. We don't care what it is. We're going to synchronize the users. So this will synchronize the users, right? So even if it exists because we created it, so when we created, we added to the database anyway. Mm-hmm. But we want to get all the users because that way we can have a before count.
Yes.
That before count should be greater than 0. Mm-hmm. Then we don't need this because we already did it just now. Then we get the user from the database. So this gets the user locally. Mm-hmm. We expect it to exist in the database. And then we send it to delete user. And we expect it to be truthy. So this will return true if a status of a deletion returns as
like 200
it's kind of I think it returns 201, I believe, because it's kind of null content, or 204, I think, one of them.
Okay.
And then we synchronize the users again.
Yeah.
And we expect the count to be -1 compared to this count here after we added the user.
Yes.
Yeah. And probably we can do the same thing that we did here. So if we try and find the user by name, we expect it to be null now. So we can do it in one go.
Okay.
So we expect it not to exist in the database.
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
I believe so. Okay, cool. So
we're making sure that specific user got deleted.
Exactly. And this is actually good because that means we don't have any side effects because tests are running. So we're creating a user and we delete it right away. So we always in case we run it against an app. And again, when you run the test, you probably should run it against a different app than the production app, right? Mm-hmm. X is saying, have you seen the expect to change by syntax in rspec? Yes, XE. Unfortunately, actually, we could probably use it, but in this one, there are lots of live things happening, and we're touching the database we're touching the live API 4 times. Because we're creating the user, we're getting the users, we're deleting the user, and getting the users again. So we're actually hitting the live API 4 times in this one because we're using live. So I'm not sure if you were earlier in XE when we were talking about this, but I discovered this if based on environment variable. So I'm running this only if run live is set to true. And that means that when I run it through my, excuse me. Thank you. That means when I run it through my continuous integration, it won't run against the live database. But expect to change by is definitely another one of those goodness syntax that you have in rspec. So effectively say this block should change this by 1, right? Actually, we can probably implement it. Let's test this. Actually, I'll put this off screen. Let's implement this and then add it with expect to change by 1.
Cool. Make sure to save.
Yes, thank you. And then 169. And this, I believe, will fail. And it will fail for one reason, because in delete user, we don't delete it from the database. So I think this will fail here at 178. But we'll see. That's kind of my prediction. I think one of the things about TDD is So we expected. Actually, it failed on the next one. So why is this? So users. Interesting. So one of the things we didn't do when we synchronize users is delete users that don't exist.
Oh, like when you synchronize. Okay.
Actually, no. This is it's our mistake, actually, because we said we never deleting users, but we're putting them in an inactive state, right? So
that's right. Okay.
Yeah. So actually, what we expect is
if the thing is true or like is active, false, or something like that.
Yeah. So we expect this to not be null. Let's call it after deletion user. So we expect this to not be null, but we expect after deletion user is active to equal to be falsy.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So that means we deleted from the database. I can't remember how far I went in my previous stream. Yeah, I agree, actually. The syntax is very easy to read, and I feel it feels very natural. So we're actually not syncing to the database. Cool. So here, yeah.
You have to
so only
set
take
it.
This. Yeah. So let's see what's happening in delete user. So this calls data source delete user. So what does delete users? It actually returns true or false. So because it returns true or false, we can say if this. Actually, probably one thing we should do is to get the user first. User where Vonage ID is user ID. Return false if user is null. And then if this one, we can say user update is active to false. And then return. So we can return actually false here. Return. I'm trying to do the golden path. I'm not sure if you remember, because I'm trying to exit as fast as I can. So return false if you can't do it. And then after this, you kind of update the user and return true. Does it make sense?
Okay.
So the update here, it literally is it's a short syntax for user is active, is false, user save. It's just a simpler syntax, and it can use multiple property. You can update multiple property at once.
Okay.
So we can do like this, or. So return false if the user is null or you can't delete it. And otherwise, update it with false and return true because you deleted the user. This is this is where I want to kind of follow the Ruby kind of way of doing things. So rather than returning true or false, I would rather return the user because that will be more useful, right?
Okay.
But that won't.
Was the one that was set to inactive, basically.
Yeah, so it will return the user, and the user will be inactive. So
It's going to return
What
user or
does that
something?
mean? Yeah, so probably can refactor this and say if a user is not null,
And
update the user.vonage ID, just to kind of make it a bit more obvious what we're sending.
mm-hmm.
And then just user reload, return user. So what that means is, actually, we can put it here. So if a user exists, delete it from the data source. We didn't update it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Update is active, false.
When Eggsy put something in the chat, but
Is there an active method on your after deletion user? I think you can use to not be active. You can automatically. Yeah, that's actually a good point. Let's use that in a second. Update is active. I don't think we need the reload here because the update will automatically reload the user. And also, if it's null, returns null, which is what we want. So let's actually write some tests and see what we have. So probably the best test to kind of have is kind of this sort of tests, right? So let's run the deletion test, but not run the live one yet. We're going to come back to the live one.
Okay.
So we need to run 162. Okay. What did I do here? This is a first. It's find by, not where. So the difference between find by and where is where returns an array of all the finding. Find by returns the first one that it finds.
Okay.
So it returns the object itself rather than an association. So that's a first failure. Okay. So one thing we didn't do here is to actually create that user because we're deleting something that doesn't exist in the database.
Okay.
So we can't find it in the database and returns null. So this is actually an error case. So we call it error, no such user. So this will return null, right? Because you can't find the object in the database.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
I believe so.
So for this one, we'll need to create a user like this. So let's create a user. So we'll say user is factory bot create user, and we need the Vonage ID to be this. Mm-hmm. So that means it exists in the database.
Okay.
We're mocking the data source and say, yeah, it returns true, although that doesn't exist in the Conversation API. So we're expecting this to be truthy. So actually, this returns the user, right?
Yes, returns the actual user.
Let's call it after deletion user is this one. So we expect this to not be null.
And then also it's is active thing to be false?
Yeah. So let's use the syntax that Exy actually put it in the chat. So I'm going to put it on the screen so everyone sees what it is. So expect after deletion user is, to not be active. So what this does, it's a syntactic sugar. It will run isActive method on that particular property, on that particular object. It does it automatically on the fly.
So how does it know that is active is the property?
So if it finds, so what happened here? To is active? Do you need to put it like that? I think it does active like that.
Okay.
Okay. So for this one, I actually need a bit of syntactic sugar. So if we go to user and we add a property, actually a method called active, and just return is active. Oops. Right?
So it knows to associate the active thing with that property.
Yeah. So and in Ruby, you can use question marks and other characters as part of function names or method names.
Okay.
So question mark is usually used for methods that returns true or false.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have exclamation mark that is used for a lot of methods. Like we had save for objects, for example. You can have save exclamation mark. The difference is if you don't have exclamation mark, if it fails, it just doesn't return exception. If it fails, it throws an exception for you to catch.
Okay.
So that's
okay. So that's where it knows to be like, all right, is active. The property I need to look for on user is active.
Yeah. So because this one, I think it translates to after deletion user null, like that, if I believe. So it's exactly the same thing. And I think that applies to any object, if I'm not mistaken. I may be completely. I was thinking, do we want to test this? Probably not, because it's simple enough, right? And I don't think it's worth the time to actually test it. But let's test this. That's a good point, actually. Do I have a meeting I need to go to?
Yeah, I think I've got something at like we have a
what time is that
thing? Is that 11? I think. Oh yeah, we're late.
We're late. Okay, cool. Okay. It's what happens when you have fun. Is it the CLI stuff?
The rabbit from no, well, I think it's like everyone.
Oh, it's the team. Actually, if you don't mind, can we spend another 5 minutes on this? I thought
that's cool.
It's a one because I think that's recorded. So
yeah, they record it anyway.
We're gonna stay for another 5 minutes because I really want to finish this delete stuff and just kind of put it away, and then next time use the conversations.
That's cool.
So we expect this to be null and then to be deleted, and that's what we have here. So error no such user, right? Sorry, this is not such user. This is the success, the one that we just had. So it's actually working properly. So this, we don't have a user. This, if it returns false. Okay.
Could you move X? Can't see.
Oh yes, of course. Yes, sorry, I forgot. So we have a success. I'm trying to think what sort of errors we want to have. So what happens if? So we know if you don't have the user, it will fail, and this is why this passes, because you don't have a user. So let's actually create the user here. So in this case, the error is invalid response, so it returns false. So that means the API can't delete that user for whatever reason. So we kind of get the user after deletion. So we expect
that at user ID, would you switch that out for your user?
At user ID, this one.
This
is defined here.
Okay.
Actually, yeah, that's a good point. We should reuse this, so we can use this one here.
Okay.
That's a good point, because I was just copying the same value. So that's just to make sure that we have we generating. It's a random thing, not right. So we can probably actually, just to make it a bit safer, we can do this. So that generates before each one, it generates a different user ID.
Okay.
Right. So because we don't really care what it is.
Yeah.
Because we create the user. Yeah. And let's call it Vonage ID rather than user ID. Just to make it a bit more kind of easier to understand.
Okay.
So another thing that we didn't test, and I think we should, is the fact that initially is active.
So on 200, you have to change that to Vonage ID also.
200.
Like 201 now, probably.
Oh, yes. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this one here as well. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So that way it's a bit easier to understand. Okay, cool. Let's rerun the tests.
So in Ruby, because like JavaScript, you could just put Vonage ID instead of Vonage ID : @Vonage ID. You have to actually specify it, saying Vonage _ID, like on 199, just because you have like
199. Yeah.
So
the reason you do it like this is because you already create a user.
Yeah.
This is kind of overriding some of those properties of those users.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying because in JavaScript you could just put just Vonage _ID, but I didn't know if in Ruby there's something similar.
No, it's not. No.
Okay.
You need to specify both, but something is failing. So I don't understand. 198 is failing, and it's failing because expects to.
Expected that.
Got false. So if this returns false, so actually, but the other one is failing as well. So expect to not be null after deletion user on
success. Oh, because you have user _ID. It should be Vonage _ID.
Ah, good catch. Thank you. So this should fix the first one. Okay, it fixed the first one. So why is the second one failing? So it's failing in 204, which is this one.
So wouldn't that be false? Because I think XE said something about to not be active.
No, because returns false. So if a server says I can't delete that user, we don't want to modify the right. So let's see.
Okay, so it'd still be true.
So yeah, we didn't have so if right. So you only want to update if the deletion works.
Okay.
So to make it fancy, we can even do this. Is that harder to read than the previous one, Dwayne? What do you think?
For me, from JavaScript, it just looks weird because it's like, because normally you have the condition before the result. So for it to be, so for me, if you write Ruby, I'm sure you probably understand.
No, I think one of the reasons I think, and this is why it's good for us to do it kind of cross languages is to make sure that we kind of do things properly. Another one Dwayne XE is saying is you can do this in Ruby, and I think it works in the same way in JavaScript.
Yeah, we have double ampersand. So depending on if both have to be true in order for it to actually work.
Yeah, but in Ruby, this gets evaluated first, and if this is false, the entire expression will be false.
Yeah.
So this doesn't get evaluated. And that's kind of it's kind of a side effect, right? So what's happening here is if this fails, this doesn't get updated. If this kind of works, this gets updated. So so in Ruby it says, well, if you have an and the first part of and fails, the whole and fails, right? So there's no reason to kind of do the second expression.
Yeah. I think we have the same thing in JavaScript. I think people use that in React in order to show things or not to show things. Yeah, pretty sure.
I see what actually is saying. You can put it on. It can do this.
Okay, so if it's not null and
if it's not null and you can even do this. I mean, this is we're taking it to a crazy level now, but you can do this.
Huh. Sure.
Right. So evaluation is left to right. So if it's not null, fine, it passes. It does this. If this is true as well, it does this. Right. But it's way too. So I think as a middle ground, I think this is probably the most readable one. So if a user is not null and you can update the data source, then you get this.
Then you update that property.
So now the test should pass all of them.
You have to hide XC again.
Oh yes. I'm gonna make a T-shirt with hide Xe again. Which one do you like, Xe? Do you think this one is the most readable one, or do you want to like a if on all of them? Cool. So I think, yeah, in terms of response, you only have true or false. So I think this is it. Because if we don't have users, it doesn't really matter what you return. It's always going to be null. So probably actually you can do it again like this and return false here, kind of to test both scenarios. If you don't have a user, I guess, kind of not have another test. Yeah, and we have a live one, right? So let's try and rerun the live one and see if it's still working.
Okay.
So it's 169. X is saying that's the most legible to me, but I have a big Perl background, so it might not be the most Ruby. I usually ask Rubocop. I agree. Actually, funny enough, my first job in IT, I was using Perl as well.
Wait, you asked who? Robocop, what?
Rubocop. Rubocop is it's a library. I think we use it in our Nextmon developer. That kind of enforces things. I can't remember the name of the one in for Node.
So like, you mean like ES-linting and all that stuff?
Exactly. It's literally a linter, but it does more than that.
Robocop.
Yeah, it's a static code analyzer and code formatter. Yeah, people have all sorts of weird names for their libraries in Ruby. All sorts of different names.
Robocop was a pretty good movie and TV show.
It's a pretty good analogy, right? Okay, so this one creates the user, gets the user. I think it's all working, Dwayne. So
yeah,
actually, what we can do is we can run all the different tests for the entire file with live.
You just have to hide
Xe, the T-shirt. So one thing I want to show you is look at this this time, 7.32 seconds, right? So it run all the live kind of calls, and probably the longest one was the deletion because it does different things. It kind of touches the API 4 times. I think create user touches it 3 times. So let's see the difference, and this is why you want to have kind of option to kind of check stuff from kind of load responses from the local database. Yeah, look, 0.39 seconds.
Nice.
That's the time you save just by mocking things and kind of doing it. Yeah.
That's cool.
Cool. I had fun. This was really good.
Things went really well.
Yeah, I'm going to continue working on my kind of personal one on this because I think I'm kind of rediscovering things in Ruby myself. I think it makes it a bit easier for me to talk to you. I think it kind of makes it a bit more enjoyable because I don't have to type and kind of think of what I want to do. So
you want to plug your stream? You want to plug your personal stream, and when you go live?
I can do. So I think I should. Yeah. So my personal stream is twitch.tv/pardel, PRDL, and I'm streaming on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 p.m. UK time. So that's kind of really late o'clock in Europe, and probably impossible o'clock in. Thank you, Xe. I appreciate that. I try to not to kind of push people from here because obviously it's a professional. It's the Vonage channel, and
but if people want to learn more about like Ruby, because you'll be digging even deeper dive.
Of course, yeah. Actually, one thing that I want to plug is Michael's stream this week. So he's doing something amazing on his stream, the Bold Bearded Builder. He's doing a Blazor week, so he has he invited a lot of different people from, I think, including Steve.
Yep, Steve is on there. Yep, to talk about Blazor.
different people from the Microsoft environment, and they're gonna have a full week talking about Blazor and Michael learning Blazor and stuff like that. So it gives me ideas. It's a Blazor week actually. I think a lot of people are going to be excited about that because it's a massive thing. So yeah, I was thinking in December maybe I should learn Vue and kind of play a pun on all I want for Christmas is Vue. But I think someone else actually can probably do it better than me. So I'm going to stick with Ruby for now and probably do it at some point next year. Vue and TypeScript is definitely on my list to learn. So,
well, they have TypeScript in Vue now, so you can learn both at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. So I think Vue 3 is written in TypeScript, isn't it? I think that's
like if you ask Michael, he'd be like, "No, this is horribly written." But
I know.
They did
I think I got that feedback from him. Yeah, Xe is saying, "Have you looked into the Rails version of Blazor? Cable ready stimulus reflex?" I haven't.
I don't know what that means.
It's probably just libraries that kind of try to replicate the Blazor whole thing. I'm not kind of. I don't know much about Blazor.
All I'm saying is the web will always win. That's what I get from all this.
Yeah, I don't think I agree with you. I think the web is just another app. It's just a browser.
Yeah, exactly. It's just
all about data, right? So the most effective way to send the data around is not the browser; it's specialized apps. But a lot of people don't like building specialized apps.
Yeah, I'm just saying everybody's moving. I'm just saying everybody's moving to the web. That's all. Just saying.
Well, everyone was on web to start with.
Then Apple decided, like, hey, you know what? Let's make this store thing that only.
Yeah, I mean, there are benefits and downsides to both of them. So this is what Xe was saying about Blazor. Cable ready from Stimulus Reflex. So I'm guessing it's a JavaScript library that adds a lot of kind of good things to do with the DOM. So yeah, apparently it's a way of calling JavaScript from your Ruby code and vice versa. Interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna have a look at this. Thank you, Xe, for showing us this. I think we're really late. I think actually our next meeting is ours, right? It's
our meeting. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So let's have 8 minutes, get a coffee, use the facilities, and then we'll reconvene for our one-to-one. Thank you everyone for watching.
Thanks,
have an
everybody.
amazing day. Have an amazing week. Thank you for keeping us company. Thank you, Xe, for all your help with different things.
Everybody that came through, Ben, and who else? I'm scrolling through
Martin
here.
was there.
Martin Screechrat.
Screechrat, yeah.
Thanks,
lots of people were in there. So we really appreciate your time and being with us. And have an amazing week.
Have a great week.
And I'll see you. Yeah, no, let's plug something else. Let's plug developer.nextmo.com. I want to with Vonage Dev. So we have some. I think this is this week we have low code hour with Julia, and she's going to talk about N8N IO and the no code. And then we have Vonage Gems. Yeah, so
Ruby
if you enjoy
goodness.
Ruby today, join Ben on Wednesday. What is he doing?
Some Facebook chatbots and WhatsApp and.
Come and learn how to build apps that can communicate with the world through. Well, I think this is a generic thing. I don't think he has anything specific for this week.
Yeah, it's just know it's going to be good.
Yeah, exactly. And then Lauren learns things, and she's going to have Beth as a guest.
Nice.
That'd
be really
nice,
good.
Yeah. Beth is one of the. Go on.
Oh no! One of the people that helps us, organize what events and things we're going to go to, and basically community manager. So yeah.
Yeah,
like the traffic controllers of like where we will be at. So they're kind of like, you go this way, this thing. Yeah.
Exactly. She helps a lot behind the scenes, and it's one of those. She's one of those people that kind of helps a lot, but doesn't get the whole recognition she deserves. So it'll be great to see her on the stream. So
hopefully they go into like she has a degree in like anthropology, something. I was like, oh wow. So find out.
Yeah,
they're probably done with that stuff. Yeah.
Xe is saying if you're interested in a Twitch bot for CRSR, that's his GitHub repository. So I'm not sure. Oh, for the cable thing that he said.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Okay.
I was
So
like
he's
client
using
side rendering and server
no,
side
it's
rendering.
cable
Okay.
ready stimulus reflex. That's yeah. Thank you very
Nice.
much, everyone. Have an amazing day. Have an amazing week. Thank you for being with us. We keep saying goodbye for the last 10 minutes, but have a good day. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have an amazing week. Bye.